Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Daniel Batal channel. I've got a lot in store today. For any of you who have been following along with the journey here as we've been working our way through DaVinci Resolve, there's been a huge learning curve because there are so many different pages inside of DaVinci Resolve. And I think a lot of us are used to the edit page, like we've sort of wrapped our heads around how to bring footage in and get started, start cutting it up. But when you get outside of that edit page or the cut page and you start looking at things like Fusion or the color page, man, I swear it can get confusing really fast. So what I thought I would do is I would actually reach out to someone here on YouTube who's a professional colorist, who's been doing this for years, does it for a living, and happens to also use DaVinci Resolve. And I want to bring him in here and we can ask him questions. We're going to talk about color grading. We're going to talk about the colors page. We're going to talk about, a little bit about what he does for a living so you can better understand what he does. So I don't want to waste any more time. Let me bring him in right now, ladies and gentlemen, our pal, Mr. Darren Mostyn. Darren, thank you for being here, pal.
Good afternoon. Good morning. Whatever.
So listen, I know who you are because I stalk you on YouTube. I just sit there and I start watching your videos going, all right, I'm going to figure this color grading thing out, if it kills me. But can you tell the people here in the chat and in the replay exactly who you are and what is it you do for a living?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I am in real life colorist. So it is actually a job. That is my full-time job. YouTube is a sideline that has grown much quicker than I thought it would, but it's slowly taken over my every weekend. But yeah, I'm a professional colorist, so I'm known for grading mainly documentaries. So my clients are BBC, Amazon Music. I do a lot of music videos for Amazon. They're a really good client. I do lots of stuff for ITV, Channel 5, Channel 4, all the big UK broadcasters. And I've done a lot of stuff globally as well. I've done stuff for ABC, TNT, Turner. I've been all over the world with my work, so I've been very fortunate. I've been doing it a long time though, so I'm 30 years in broadcast. I'm nearly 20 years as a colorist. So when I was starting out as a colorist, it was seen as a bit more of a scientist role, I guess. Whereas
well, it is. There's definitely a science to it.
Yeah, there is. Yeah,
it's really interesting to me. For a lot of people, probably here in the community, not all of them, but I know my workflow. Like when I get into Resolve, I'm sitting in the edit page. I'm taking footage that I'm filmed. I'm cutting it together. I'm trying to figure out how to make a full edit that looks like something. And color is just a piece of that. And sometimes I forget. My workflow is not everybody else's workflow. Your workflow is very different. You spend most of the time on the color page working on client work, physically just trying to develop color.
Absolutely. Yeah, the edit will come to me as a finished edit. It's often, sometimes the first time I've seen it. I like to, if I'm working on documentary work, they're normally 60 or 90-minute programs. It's nice to be able to see a sort of work in progress. I'm used to seeing some rough edits, but people are very sort of proud to not share it until it's super polished. But I just want to get a feel for what sort of look we can be thinking about. It saves a little bit of time in the suite. But yeah, often I'm in the color page all the time. I obviously need to know the edit page, and obviously with my YouTube channel, I do edit my own content.
Well, that's a question I have to ask, because right off the bat, sometimes people assume things. Do you actually film, edit, and put together the YouTube videos that you make on your own?
Yeah.
That's great. I know so many creators who have teams working around them, and I start talking about editing, and they're like, I don't know, my editor does it.
Yeah, no, I was in here all day yesterday. I dropped a video last night. I was in here all day yesterday, and thanks to your kind self, I'm in here again on Sunday. I'm joking. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, I know. Hey, listen, at least you shaved. The other picture I saw of you, you seem to have a little growth going on. Glad you cleaned up today.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah, I want people to sort of have an understanding of a couple things here. There's a lot of people who come to my community and talk about editing. They want to learn editing because they're in different parts of the world. Some of them, I have a lot of people who watch my channel from India. A lot of them will be doing things like wedding videos, and they do it for a living. So sort of understanding other people's workflows being different than our own. I really want to be able to have people who make content for YouTube, for people who are trying to build careers on their own, understand that there are other careers using, editing video beyond just cutting and, smashing video together. To see guys like you and Colin Kelly, get on YouTube and be professional colorists and sort of share your whole world of living day in, day out in editing software, just handling color is sort of like foreign to me, because it's not a world that I live in. I only live in that color space for a minute while I'm working on my YouTube video. And then I'm back to, talking to people about growing a YouTube channel. Yeah. So what is it? How is it that you ended up, one, being a colorist in general? What migrated you this way? And how did you end up using DaVinci Resolve?
Yeah, okay, this is quite interesting. And on that, I spend most of my days working in the dark, so it's actually really nice to have some daylight in. So I think any of your audience who do know my channel, you normally would see that view. So that's the setup here, as it were. But that has grown over many, many years. So yeah, I've been a colorist for about 20 years. I studied photography, was my entry in. I'm seeing a large picture of me. That's it. That's okay.
That's all me. That's just making you famous, Darren. Don't panic.
And yeah, so I studied photography at art college. I got into, I'll make this sort of very brief, but I got into the world of nonlinear editing when it first came about. So this is about 1992, 3, 4. So I was right at the beginning of Avids and that sort of stuff. Did that for about 5 years, working for a manufacturer as a kind of technical support consultant and demo artist. Started doing training and that sort of thing, and I got in with a company called Digital Vision, who make a huge color grading program that is still going today, but obviously DaVinci Resolve is very dominant now. They trained me up on how to use it, and I got really, I was an editor for about 10 years in sport. I did a lot of sport highlights. I did a lot of documentary work. And naturally, we started grading stuff. So as the technology got a little bit faster and better, Avid Symphony, for example, we were then able to just start just doing little contrast, little bits of saturation, that sort of stuff. And it was, it was really evolving very quick. So it was becoming a career that I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed that part of it more than the editing side. Got picked up by Digital Vision, and then Blackmagic Design. I'm jumping forward quite a few years now, but Blackmagic Design bought DaVinci Systems. And this is in 2010, I think. And I knew the guys at Blackmagic Design anyway, and they asked me to come up and have a look at it and see what I thought of it. And I was very honest with them what I thought of it. It wasn't very good. And I did.
Be careful what you ask.
Yeah. So, but I said, look, let me give it 6 months. Let me see how it goes. And they wanted me to do a job on it. I had a BBC documentary coming up. I said, look, this is a broadcast deadline job. I can't be on this equipment. But as it happened, I actually got the job, came in a few days early, which is unheard of. I mean, it's always late, but it actually came in a few days early. So I said, what I'll do is I'll do the prep on it and start work. And if it goes wrong, I'll go back to my existing system. And they gave me a tech support mobile phone number, said, we've got someone on hand for the whole weekend for you. And it worked. I did a full 60-minute documentary on it, and I've been on it since. That was 2010. Wow. I think I was actually the first long form program on it since from when it became Blackmagic and not DaVinci Systems.
Wow, that's, and I think that, and this was what year that happened, Darren?
That was 2010. So I've been on it 14 years.
I think people sometimes forget that there has been a story arc to DaVinci Resolve's, long and, or maybe short and illustrious career.
Yeah. There was no edit page.
No edit page, right? That was it.
That's all it did.
That's what it did. It's become the sort of the industry standard for a lot of color grading in the motion picture industry. I mean, you see a lot of people coming to Resolve just for the color grading, even if they don't edit on it, because the color grading is really good. And over the years, they were able to buy Fusion and add that in. So you had a compositing software dropped in. They bought Fairlight, which was its own standalone digital audio workstation. Then that was incorporated. So you're seeing this product that is really like multiple softwares, professional grade softwares put together into one. And that's part of the reason that the learning curve is tricky, because sometimes we think we have to learn everything first and then start working. And it's like, don't do that.
It's a beast. It really is. I mean, your audience might find this quite refreshing, but I open up Fusion, I just close it down straight away. I have no idea what's going on in there.
Let's get you heard it here, folks. Even Darren Mostyn's not afraid to say, the Fusion page is scary. It's scary in those woods.
And I think you don't need to know everything. People think you've got to know the whole program inside out. You really don't. Just take a little bit at a time. Treat each tab separately, each page in its own separate way. If you don't like working in the cut page, don't work in the cut page. I can do a little bit of stuff in Fairlight. I can, I can lose if we've got a light switch in a shot or a fire extinguisher or something. I can remove that in Fusion, but that's all I know how to do.
Yeah.
That's
okay. Hey, listen, I've got a whole channel that can help you with things like that. But listen, let's get focused to really the world that you live in. And that is the color page and color grading.
Yeah.
This has been something that you and I were talking when we were emailing. For people who don't know, I'm just meeting Darren today too. We spoke on email. He actually had left a comment in a video. I saw the comment. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't usually get starstruck. I've been, I've been on tour. I've opened up for Aerosmith. I've sat in rooms with like Jimmy Page, and there's Darren's name, and I went, "Oh my god, that's Darren Mostyn." I was telling Megan, like, Darren Mostyn left a comment. So I immediately reached out and said, "Hey, would you come on and be interested in talking about color and color grading?" And he was, generous enough to come on and do this. I think when people first start editing in Resolve, because it's such a heavy workflow, it's a big UI, it's got a steep learning curve, that, a lot of us come from shooting video on our phones, on our iPhones or whatever, our Android phone, or maybe we do have a mirrorless camera or a DSLR, but we're basically point shoot, a lot of auto. Maybe we spent a little time learning, a little bit about, how to get the ISO right. And maybe we can start playing with our lenses and depth of field. Maybe we've learned the exposure triangle on a good day, but we bring a lot of stuff in and we just sort of take it off of our cards or plug it in, bring it into Resolve. And then we start color grading. And having started to really learn more about color spaces, could you sort of explain to us from the very beginning, when you see footage, when you just see a project that has footage in it, what's the first thing you're looking at when you start staring at that footage?
Depends on the client. I mean, so I deal with all sorts of stuff as well. Particularly the documentary work that I do. A lot of it is factual crime type documentary. We're looking at archive footage. Maybe if it's we do a lot of either murder stuff. But if it's happened in the 80s, I'm dealing with footage from the 80s. We're dealing with CCTV cameras. We're dealing with today police body cam footage. Right up to your Aries and your the new Ursa Cine 12K that's just come out. We're dealing with super high end stuff, often mixed in with lesser quality stuff. So the color balancing, the color grading is really about unifying that and getting a nice coherent look across the whole thing. I'm never going to make a police body cam footage look like it's been shot on an Ursa Cine, but we can improve it. We can always improve it. I have a not a mantra, but I do have a phrase that says to my clients, I could definitely make it look better. How much better depends on what you give me. But
when I'm bringing in footage, like I will tell you that a lot of the people that I talk to who are sort of creators like me, like we're not making documentaries. A lot of us aren't making films. We're making YouTube videos. We're making stuff for social media or that sort of thing. And like I know a lot of people when I talk to them about maybe shooting in log, because I use Sony cameras, and I talk about shooting in log, and they look at me like, "What do you mean log? What is log? I don't know what that is."
Yep.
I think that that's something I'd like to talk to you about. Like when you see footage brought into a project, there seems to be two words that float around your channel a lot, and that's color space and sort of color gamut, and that is, as I understand it, is sort of like color and light. But can you explain to us those two principles as you look at them, or how you see them, and how important they are to us as people who are trying to edit?
I mean, how to lose your audience quickly.
No, I mean, just if you can give us the color space and gamut for dummies, so that we can understand it.
Probably easier if I show you. So I'll keep it light. Let's not, Sunday afternoon. Let's keep it. Let's keep it light. But let me just give you. I'll just share my screen if that's okay.
Yeah, everybody, put your seatbelts on. This could get dangerous.
Stop me if it gets too deep. I can talk about this stuff for hours. Let me see where I'm going in here. Okay. All right. So you should be able to see a screen.
Yeah, we do.
This is actually shot on Osmo Pocket 3. Very typical of what a lot of people who do YouTube channels do. This is what I use for my vlogging stuff. So this image has got nothing on it at all. So I'm in the color page and I've done nothing. This is I've just literally walked into the color page, and this is the footage straight out of the camera. And as you can see, it looks, if I close that down, you get a bigger screen. It looks okay. You know, there's nothing wrong with that at all. But if I just start now, normally at this point, I would grab my panel here, but I'm going to do it all in the software so you can see what I'm doing. So primary color wheels here, you've got lift, gamma, gain, and offset. Think of this as this is your shadows, this is your midtones, and this is your highlights. And the offset is your overall image. So if I lift here, you see my overall image goes up and down. And you can see that on this waveform here. So the scope should become your best friend. I'll try not to get much deeper than scopes. But this is showing me this is black level and this is highest white level. Okay, so as long as my image is sitting in there, if I just go extreme and push this, you see as we go to the top, it all gets crushed. And you can see that quite clearly in the image looking awful. So let me reset that. So this is actually not log footage. So you hear the term log. Let me show you what log footage looks like. If I go to another sequence.
Well, what is that footage that you were just using? Because I want to make sure we understand. How do you even know what if a footage is log footage or what it might be?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I need this information from my client. So obviously I have shot this, so I know it's from an Osmo 3. And when I shot it in there's 3 modes on an Osmo. You can shoot in log. So it's called D-Log. You can shoot in this mode, which is, what's it called? DGI-M, I think, M-Log, which is not fully log. Or you can shoot it straight, what's called Rec 7. You might hear the term Rec 709 bounced around a lot. That's basically what a display monitor looks like. So technically, this footage is very easy to grade because it's not that log, as it were. So if I just bring my shadows down a little bit, and bring my highlights up a little bit. We're just trying to stretch out the bandwidth that we've got to play with. Okay, the amount of dynamic range is what it's called. And then if I just add a little bit of saturation to it, and that's a bit too much, but something like that, we've already got a pretty decent looking footage. And I've only done lift, gain, and a little bit of saturation. Now, if I reset that, you can use color management to get this. So that was to get it in a decent starting point. So it looks a little bit flat, but it's not fully log. Let me just quickly show you what a log is.
All right. So just to make sure that everyone's following along, if anybody has any questions in the audience, feel free to jump in.
Yep.
What you just did is grabbed a piece of footage. You know the camera it was shot in. You brought it. You opened it up on the color page. You're using the primary color wheels down in the lower left.
Yep.
And you are just moving. I refer to them as it's lift, gamma, gain, and offset. To me, the way I always think low, mids, highs because I'm an audio guy. So I'm always think like bass, middle, and treble. And then the offset is sort of like moves the entire thing all at once, almost like a master volume to me.
It's the whole image, correct? Absolutely, yeah. So
and you're using the scope you're choosing to use in the lower right. Are there certain scopes when you open up footage and you start looking and trying to understand what's going on in the footage? Are there certain scopes you prefer to use over others?
In my real world, I'm using something called Omniscope, which is a dedicated software with scopes on it. The DaVinci Resolve scopes are 100% working perfectly. They just show me different types of ranges. So it's just basically a different way of seeing this scope. But the DaVinci Resolve ones, if I just press this little button here, I can pop them out. So you can have 1, 2, or 4.
So your pop-out went to a different screen.
You can pop that out to a different screen if you want. Yeah, I've only got one screen.
Yeah, you've got it popped out to a different screen. So we're not seeing your pop-up?
Oh, sorry. I see. I might have to leave it in there then.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll show you the two. So the two main ones, the two important ones are waveform, which is measuring brightness. So this is your blacks, this is your whites, and everything in between is your range. So let me take that grade off again. You can see when it starts off, there's a lot of room for expansion. And again, if I just very quickly just show you a very flat footage like this one, you can see it's really all just sitting in the middle. So if I've got a lot of room now to push this up before it goes out of range. Okay, so the idea is you want to keep it within this range, but keep it between 0 and 1023. Let me go back to the other footage, because the other scope that you want to be looking at is the vector scope. So the vector scope is measuring saturation. So it's hue and saturation. So hue being red, green, blue, cyan, magenta, yellow. And the amount of that is determined by how far this line goes out. So if I show you, if I take saturation out completely, we now have a black and white image, and we have no trace spread here at all because there's no saturation. If I go extreme and add lots, the more the image is saturated, the bigger, the more these vectors spread out. Okay, so I can tell by looking at that it's actually got quite a bit of saturation in it already. If I just make that look good to my eye, somewhere around there is good. We don't want to be going outside of these boxes, really. That's as a guide. So the combination of looking at the colors and the saturation versus the brightness level of those in the waveform is a really good way to understand color grading. I do a lot of work using my scopes. If I'm trying to analyze an image to start with, my eyes are good. I've been doing it a long time, but the scopes are not lying. The scopes are telling me if I think something's too blue and the scopes are telling me it's not, it's not. It's time for me to have a rest, if that's what I'm thinking.
Well, let me ask you a question here. I want to, it's very easy to get lost in some of the terminology that you probably deal with every single day and feels like natural part of your language.
Yeah.
Right off the bat, the minute we started talking, the kinds of questions I start seeing in my own head. Like Cycle and Sid, Paul, good to see you, Paul, says, Rec 709, is that like what we get out of a phone? Can you take a second to sort of explain what are we even talking about when you say things like Rec 709?
Yeah, 100%. It's probably, one of the most used words on my channel. So Rec 709 is purely a standard, an international standard that is explaining how a regular HD TV color should look. It's not my best explanation, but it's
wasn't it a standard that was developed a long time ago, though? Because we're still seeing it now, but it's like this holdover from years gone by when people started referencing color spaces for televisions we would have in our home.
Yep. So now what we have is, so we're still in Rec 709 world. Excuse me. So when I'm grading for BBC, I have to deliver to what's called Rec 709, so that when it leaves here, the idea being my monitor is set up to be perfectly set for Rec 709, whichever gamma I'm using. We'll come to that in a moment if you want. But when it leaves here, I've got another thing that I say to a director or DOP when they leave here. It's like, it's never going to look that good again. You're looking at it on a 10-gram monitor. When you leave here, it's not going to look the same.
Right, yeah.
Their TV might be a little bit blue, it might be a little bit warm.
Right.
So the idea is Rec 709 is a standard display. It has a standard brightness. It has a standard black level, white level kind of thing.
Right.
So it's a standard. So the idea is if we're all set to Rec 709, and if you open up your computer or your phone, there's sometimes it'll either say Rec 709, it might say BT, I can't remember what it is, BT something. It's just a international standard, but it basically means high definition telly.
Gotcha. But when you're talking about Rec 709, are we referring to, because there's so many different things we have to understand. Are we referring to color space? Do we literally say that is a color space? Yes,
it is a color space. It's a very small color space. HDR is a terminology you might be hearing a lot of. This is a huge color space. If you shoot on Sony, so people might know Sony S-Log3, for example, is a setting on a Sony camera. That is a very large color space, which means it can absorb a lot of information. It gives us a lot of dynamic range. But eventually, we've got to funnel it all down to this tiny little world of Rec 709 because my TV at home can't display this huge color space that Sony's sitting in, that the Blackmagic cameras are sitting in, that your iPhone can shoot in now. Your iPhones have incredible range. So Rec 709 is basically, it's quite old technology. And we're getting...
So when most people are picking up an Android phone or an iPhone or even a sort of an entry-level or mid-level camera that they might be shooting video on, are there specific color spaces within cameras, within phones that are sort of common that we're seeing the average everyday sort of hobbyist or maybe YouTuber unwittingly know that's this color space they're shooting in?
Yeah, to be honest, unless you've set something in your phone to say that you don't want to, you'll be, depending on your phone, I guess, but you'll be primarily recording in Rec 709 without even knowing it. So the idea being, if you film something and you put it into your computer and play it back and it looks good, it's probably Rec 709.
Gotcha. And it's sort of like the technology that we have in our pockets and our hands is sort of taking that step to go, listen, we're going to do you a little favor here and get you into a color space that the minute you look at it on your phone or on your computer at home, it's going to look okay.
Exactly. And so this is why color grading has become so much more relevant in the last, I don't know, 10 years because of shooting outside of Rec 709. So, you know, when I was color grading 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, more than 10, but about 20 years ago, everything was Rec 709. You know, we were shooting on, people shooting on DV cam cameras. They weren't capable of shooting outside of Rec 709 world. Color grading was really just to make the colors look a little bit, you know, a little bit sexier, really.
Right.
Whereas now people are shooting, if they're shooting with, I keep using Sony S-Log 3 as an example, or Canon C-Log or whatever, that word log means that you're shooting a much larger color space than Rec 709. So it has to be color graded.
Gotcha.
Or it has to be color managed because.
So when we're talking about log versus like a Rec 709, like if I'm just shooting on my iPhone and I just make a video and I put it into Resolve, it usually looks kind of like what it looked like when I was looking on my phone. But if I'm on one of my Sony cameras and I do decide to swap over and say I'm going to shoot in S-Log for Sony and I bring it into Resolve, it looks like washed out. It looks like there's no color. It like, what happened? Where's all the beauty in it? And is it because when you choose to shoot in that larger color space that the camera itself isn't adding all of these things in to sort of make it look better right off the bat? Or is it just the fact that the color space is larger?
It's the color space is larger, so it needs work to bring it into Rec 709. The idea being, when you're working in that larger color space, we can hold much more information. You get more information in the shadows. You get more information in the highlights. It's not Rec 709 can clip very quickly. It can't handle the dynamic range that cameras can handle these days. So by choosing to put it, and with these expensive cameras, you don't have to shoot in log. So I've got an A7S3 Sony. So for my YouTube, it can do S-Log 3 quite happily. That will need grading. But when I'm recording my YouTube, I've got it set to Rec 709. I just shoot it. I haven't got time to start grading my own footage. So I get it out. So I actually just set it up some nice lighting. I've tweaked a few settings inside the camera, but that's Rec 709 coming out of there.
And it's nice to me. It's like sort of right there to begin with. And what's really interesting, and I don't want to get too heady here, one of the things that I have really been embracing on the content in your channel is, you know, you're looking at a lot of footage, sometimes gets handed to you in log and it's got a bigger color space and you start showing all the ways, you know, how to sort of really work in that larger color space. And you've shown like Rec 709 kind of, you know, iPhone footage. I even watched one of your videos where you went out intentionally and you were shooting on an iPhone, and I think you were even shooting in ProRes and just sort of showing the different color spaces and what you can do. But you do a really cool thing where you explained color space in a way that I didn't understand before I heard you talk about it. And that was explaining that sort of, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. I want to make sure you understand so I can let you run with it. You're explaining that, listen, Resolve allows you to take the color space that your footage may have been shot in, but you can open up the barn doors and you can take Rec 709 footage and you can put it into a larger color space while you're editing, which is sort of Resolve specific, called DaVinci Wide Gamut, right? I believe that's correct. Tell me where I'm wrong. But you can sort of like it's sort of like someone gives you the little box of crayons. You bring it into Resolve, and Resolve goes, "We're going to give you the big box of crayons and sharpener in the back." Right. And you can go, you can really build out the color, a lot more control, a lot more finesse, and then filter it back down to Rec 709 and send it out at the end.
Correct.
Can you talk to us about that process and nodes and how that makes sense? Because I think that's a big part of what you do, and the nodes get confusing. And once you start understanding it, I'm like, oh, now it makes sense.
It's really, it's obviously the most common thing that I get asked all the time is, color management. What is it? How does it work? I think people really over explain it and overthink it. It's incredibly straightforward. Obviously, I'm a colorist, so it's, it's pretty, but I think people just go too heavy with it. It's really simple. Basically, what you're doing is you kind of work from the end backwards is the easiest way. It needs to finish up being Rec 709 for the reason being, I don't have a monitor that displays S-Log 3. There's no such thing. Okay, monitors display Rec 709. It's as simple as that, unless you go down HDR, but let's save that for another Sunday. So let's just argue all monitors need to be in Rec 709. That's what we're looking at it in. When you look at it on your computer, when you look at it on YouTube, it's Rec 709. Okay, so we have to end up at Rec 709. When you start, if we go back to the beginning now, you give me, let's take our documentary. Okay, it might have been, the interviews might be shot on ARRI, or let's say Sony S-Log 3. I've got this archive footage that might be security camera footage. It might be old VHS. It could be anything. That is all going to be Rec 709. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then someone comes in with a bit more footage and they've shot it on a Canon camera in log. Those 3 different flavors need to all end up being Rec 709. Okay. And the easiest way to do that is when you start with them is to have a middle color space that unifies them all. And then we take that unifying color space and make that Rec 709 at the end. But at the beginning, we make our Sony S-Log. Sorry, let me backtrack. The middle ground that we're going to work in needs to be a nice, big, large color space that can handle all the ones that you feed into it. And the biggest one that there is, or one of the biggest ones, is made by Blackmagic themselves. It's called DaVinci Wide Gamut. So you might hear this term thrown around a lot. DaVinci Wide Gamut, DWG. It's just another color space. You don't have to have DaVinci Wide Gamut, but it's a common one to use because it's very big. So Arri can fit in it, Sony can fit in it, Canon can sit in it, Rec 709 can sit in it. We send it all to DaVinci Wide Gamut. We work in DaVinci Wide Gamut all the time. You might have seen people set their timeline settings to be DaVinci Wide Gamut. I can show you that. That's saying I'm going to work in DaVinci Wide Gamut, and then right at the end, I go, I've only got to take one color space down to Rec 709, and that's DaVinci Wide Gamut to 709. So we're going to go all our different inputs. So we've got Arri, Sony, Canon, Osmo, iPhone, whatever it is. We send them all to one unified color space, and the maths is all done scientifically in DaVinci Resolve. It knows exactly which. All it's doing is remapping pixels to say, if you are Rec 709, I'm going to pixel map you to DaVinci Wide Gamut. I'll do the maths. Don't you worry about it. And then right at the end, we take that DaVinci Wide Gamut big pot with all our color grades in it. That might be 1 node. That might be 600 nodes. It doesn't matter. But it's all been graded in a nice big color space. So it's a big bucket, if you like. And then that bucket at the end gets funneled down because Rec 709 is a small color space, but we need it to be in that small color space because I haven't got a TV at home that shows me the dynamic range of DaVinci Wide Gamut, which is
all right. So let me see if I can dumb this down for my own brain. So when you say things like you say Arri comes running, it falls out of your mouth, and I know that Arri is a camera, right? That's an actual camera, and it actually has its own format. That when you film on these expensive cinema grade Arri cameras, they have their own sort of language. When you film on a Sony camera, it has its own sort of language, and they call S-Log, Sony log.
That is a color
space.
Has
color space, right? So what you're saying is when you get stuff that is from a bunch of different cameras, it's almost like having a bunch of different people who sort of might speak a little bit of English, but they all speak different language. He's speaking French, he's speaking German, he's speaking Portuguese, and you bring it into DaVinci Resolve and you go, hang on a second. Let me get you into one of those rooms where we've got interpreters that'll make sure that when everyone speaks, they're all talking nicely and everything is understood. We'll get you into a nice big, like the UN room, where everyone's got headpieces in with interpreters, and it opens up the conversation of color into a very large space where everything is automatically being brought together, even if it's filmed in a different color space from a different camera, brings them all together and allows you to color. And then when you filter it back out, you can just say, hey, listen, televisions, monitors, all the things we're used to seeing our video displayed on is in the color space we know as Rec 709, sometimes Rec 2020, but that's another discussion. And what we're looking at is we need to get it back to Rec 709 when we're done. So it's taking all these different languages. It's opening it up into a really big DaVinci Wide Gamut space, interprets all of it, allows you to color grade it, and then filter that back out to Rec 709. Now, that's easy to say in theory. But there's actually a way that you build nodes inside of the color page that physically do that, where the nodes each have a job, where you set the color space for the project, and then you decide to work within that. You build that giant room where it brings things into DaVinci Wide Gamut and then brings it back out to Rec 709. Could you show us physically what that looks like when you're opening a project, sort of from the beginning? Just pop up DaVinci Resolve so we can see physically what that does, because I think that's a big part of where you begin and you end your node trees, which is really interesting to me.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem at all. And also just remember as well, you don't have to use color management either. This is just, I'll show you why I use color management, but you don't have to. You can just stay in Rec 709 world if you want to. There's no problem bringing in your iPhone footage and just giving it a little bit of contrast and a little bit of, a little bit of snap, put some little bit of saturation in it. Job done. That's great. You don't have to understand that because it will be outputting Rec 709 automatically. So remember, the Rec 709 is because that's what our displays display. They don't display S-Log. They don't display ARRI, as I've been mentioning. These are just, I say ARRI a lot because that's a lot of the footage I get is ARRI. We get a lot of Canon, a lot of Sony. But yeah, let me show you. Sure. So I'm going to have to come off the footage that I have at the moment because it has a slightly weirder. It has a weird color space.
You're allowed to get weird if you want.
It won't help.
We embrace weird around here.
Let me use a different footage first, and then I'll come back and show you why on that one. So let me just share my screen and choose my Resolve. So you should be seeing some footage. Yep. Right, let me just change to this one. So this is ARRI. This could be Canon, this could be Sony, it doesn't matter. But it's basically very, very flat footage. Okay, if you look at this footage, that does not look great. Okay, so there's no color management on it at all. This is straight out the camera. This is what's called, this is log. Okay, so it's very flat, very typical. So what I could do is very simply go to my tools that I did before. So I'm looking at my waveform. Clearly, we've not got much going on in the shadows. We've got nothing in the highlights. That's because this is really flat and milky and it needs work. So what we're going to do is I'm going to pull down the shadows. I'm going to lift up my highlights just to stretch the image out. So it's putting some contrast into it. And that's looking.
And when you're doing that now, you are in the primary color wheels.
I am.
You're using the wheel, the lift all the way to the left and dialing that back to bring the lows down.
Yeah.
And then you're jumping 2 ahead to the gain and pulling that up to lift the top end.
Correct. So if you look at my waveform, you can see as I move gain, the top moves much more than the bottom. You still get a little bit of crossover, but if I use offset, you'll see that the whole image lifts. It lifts equally. All right. So I can set a midpoint here, then just stretch my shadows down a little bit, stretch my highlights up a little bit. They don't have to hit the top. That's not a rule. It's just, you just want a little bit more stretch in there. So that image is looking better already. This is not.
Excuse me for interrupting you. I'm from New England. That's what we do. That was an interesting thing you just did. Before you started really changing all the color grading, you took the entire light spectrum, color spectrum within the visible light. You centered it a bit and then pulled it in each direction. Is that a common thing that you'll do? Is sort of, instead of trying to, before you stretch things, you sort of balance it in the visible light spectrum?
Yeah, I'm using my scopes to trust where this image needs to sit. Gotcha. It can get quite deep. There's a little bit more to it than that, but this is a certainly good way to start learning color grading. Yeah. And then what I want to do is basically make sure that all the shots are looking roughly the same, obviously depending on what the subject is. So in here, this woman here, she will be sitting here. So it's in the lower part of the scope. So because
that scope literally is looking at this frame left to right. Like
left to right. Yeah,
if you could superimpose the scope over the frame, she would be sitting to the left in that scope.
Exactly. This is a 16:9 frame. So the way this window is in the sort of second half. And if you look at the second half, we've got much more highlight going on. So that waveform is literally reading from left to right.
Gotcha.
Okay. So that's how I know. So I know her face is sitting round about here. Just in fact, there's a little trick you can do. If I go to here and say display qualifier focus, so I'm just picking these 3 little dots here, go to display qualifier focus. What it does is where I am on it, I don't know how well you can see that on the trade.
I can. So you've got your mouse cursor, which is now an eyedropper up in the upper left preview, but it's actually making a dot down in the waveform to show you in the scope what you're looking at, what part of the frame of that video.
Exactly. It's a really useful tool. So her arm here is sitting up there in the highlights. So her hair will be in the shadows, which it is. And yeah, it's a really good tool. So there's the plant and it's sitting around about halfway. So that's the display qualifier focus. Yeah, it's a really handy little tool. So we're still not got, it still looks a bit flat. And that's if we just add a little bit of saturation to this, we've got a pretty reasonable looking image. I mean, I could broadcast that for TV, that's no problem at all. So what I'm going to do, if I just make a new version of this, if I right-hand click on this clip here and say local versions, create new version, what I can do is reset that. Okay. So what I did then was I effectively graded that shot by eye and using the scopes. Now, color management is going to do a much better job of getting what that camera saw into Rec 709 accurately for me to give me a better starting point, as if we'd set the camera to record in Rec 709. I can set that using color management to say, hey, if I'd set this camera to record in Rec 709, can you show me what it would look like? But we've got all the information from the large color space to play with. So let me show you how that looks. So if we go down to my project settings here, okay, at the minute, I go to, by default.
So your project settings didn't pop up on screen. So we're not getting that pop up.
I don't know how to make that work then. Hang on. I'm going to have to, if I stop sharing and go to, instead of window, if I do something else. Bear with me a sec. I think it's because the mode I'm choosing on the present.
Probably.
So if I go entire screen.
Yeah, and then just switch over. We'll get a minute of tunnel vision, but that's okay. You just switch over. And...
Oh, yeah. So I've got to do that. How's that? So
now I can add it. Perfect.
And now you can see it. Great. Okay. So yeah, by default, it will be on the master settings. But if we go to color management here, okay, at the moment, the color science is just saying DaVinci YRGB. This is the default. What that means effectively is do not color manage. Okay, it just means I'm going to just use lift, gamma, gain, saturation. I'm going to do it myself. What we can do is switch this. Forget these two aces. Just don't even go there. This one, DaVinci YRGB color managed. That's another Sunday. DaVinci YRGB color managed means let's do some color management on this. And if we leave this checkbox to automatic color management, we don't need to worry about anything. So I'm going to press save. And what happens is absolutely nothing. Okay. And the reason is Resolve saying, I'm going to color manage this for you. I'm very happy to, but I don't know what this footage is. I have no idea. So all we've got to do is tell Resolve what the footage is, and it will do all the maths for me. So watch this. If I right hand click on this arrow here, and you can do this on many shots at once. So you don't have to, my documentaries sometimes are 1,000 shots. I'm not going to do this 1,000 times. You just highlight all the footage that's Canon and all the footage that's Sony. But if I just right hand click in here and say input color space, now this only appears once you've switched that color management on. But if I say input color space, I can say project. So it will presume it's Rec 709 unless I tell it otherwise. This footage was actually ARRI, and it's log C3. Now, this is the tricky bit because you need to know this, and there's no way of actually finding this information out unless you shoot what's called RAW. And if you shoot RAW, the information is in the metadata. It's in the clip already. So DaVinci Resolve knows what it is. But in this case, I have to tell it. So here's Canon. Here's DJI. If you're using drones, that sort of stuff. Red, Sony. There's my S-Log3 that we were talking about earlier. There's all sorts of stuff in here. Canon, Blackmagic Design. If you want a Blackmagic Design camera, you've got a nice choice of about 15 different ones. You just need to know what you set the camera to. So this camera was set to ARRI log C3. Now watch what happens when I tell Resolve what the camera was.
Oh, wow.
It grades it for me. All right. So what it's done is exactly what I did before, but it's done it technically much more accurately than me guessing, looking at a waveform. In fact, if you look at the waveform, those highlights didn't go as high as I set them. And we can actually see a bit more information in here as well.
So hang on one second. When it did that adjustment, did it actually color grade the footage, or did it just turn it into Rec 709 and change the color space in a way that was a little easier for our monitors to understand?
Yeah, it's using camera manufacturers' maths to get there.
Okay.
So when ARRI produced that camera, or Canon, I keep saying ARRI, but just replace that with whatever camera you're using.
Sony. It's Sony people around here.
Replace that with iPhone, whatever. So if I say ARRI, I just mean camera source. But there will be a white paper from that manufacturer that tells you exactly how to map if you shoot in ARRI log 3, that is a physical science behind that. And all we're doing here is reverse engineering the science to make it as if it was set to Rec 709.
Gotcha.
But we have the quality of it being shot in this super large color space, and it's doing the fun. So when I was explaining before about you've got your 3 different cameras, you work in a big color space, then you come down to Rec 709 at the end, it's doing it for you. It's just done it massive. And if we have a look at what I did.
Yeah, pop that back up on screen there.
Compared, so I'll do it in the other way this time, not window, I'll do entire screen. And
it is
okay. So that's the technical way that ARRI did it. And if I just go and right click on here and say version 1, which was my version, and load that, there's my version. Actually, I didn't do too bad a job on that. Is that actually loaded? Version 2. Surely I didn't get it bang on. Even I'm not that good.
You can say no. Look, I nailed it.
Hang on, I'm just going to do it on my panel.
Yeah.
Just oh, there you go. There's version 1. I've just added the grade again. I didn't grade it that bad. Let me just super quick redo that. So this is without color management. Oops. Oh, sorry. I know why. Because when I did it without color management on.
Oh, there you go.
So I've got double color management going on now. So what I can do is I can put that back on. And then what I can do is click in here and say bypass color management just right. So that's what I did. Okay. And then the next version, if I put the color management back on, there's got to be an easy way of doing this. I'll tell you what, if I go to my gallery, I can actually grab that as a still. Right, let me do this again. Sorry, I've made it a little bit more complicated than I wanted.
That's all right.
I'm going to put my color management back on. And like so. Right, so that's the technical ARRI way. And then this one here is, if I put the still on, that's what I did.
Yep.
Which looked good when we did it to start with, didn't it? But
yeah.
Now, if we see what ARRI does, it gets you to a much better place. And then
softened out some of the higher, brighter bandwidths up there.
Yeah. So now what I can do is start grading this. So we can go, actually, I like what ARRI's done, but you know what? It's a little bit green looking to me. I'm just going to push. So instead of going towards green, I'm going to push away from green. And I'm just grading on top, but I've got a really nice starting point instead of that flat image that we were looking at a moment ago.
Gotcha.
So that is really what color management's doing. It's getting us to a really good starting point automatically without me having to think, does it need more highlights? Does it need less highlights? It's basically saying that is what the scene looked like when they were shooting with the ARRI.
Right.
Now, you can do what you want to it now. If you want to make it warmer, colder, fill your boots. But here's what it was. So I've got no way of knowing without color management what it actually was on set. I can make a really good guess and get close. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's how we graded for years. I mean, there was no color management even 8 years ago. The color management didn't exist in DaVinci Resolve. We just graded. It's like, let's go. You know,
it's just the Wild West.
Yeah. So it's made our lives a lot easier. So color management is really about going, can you just give me a hand here using science to get me to a great starting point? If you've shot Rec 09, you don't need to do anything.
And I'm going to follow through on that question in a minute. There's a question that came up from Naticom who said, thanks for the opportunity. Here's my question. Why is there H.624 and H.265? And what should I choose for editing my video? I'm using a DJI Mini 4 Pro. Thanks in advance. I did a quick video on this. What it is that the long and short of the conversation is that H.264 and H.265 are what we call compression codecs. And what they do is they take the footage that your camera's capturing and it squashes it down and it puts compression on it so that the file sizes are smaller. Unfortunately, they're also some of the worst to edit with, because when you bring them into something like DaVinci Resolve, Resolve has to read through that compression to be able to then do things like, you know, if you're using it in Fusion and you're trying to create effects with it, if you're trying to do other things that are really pushing noise reduction, things like that, it's got a really heavy workload. And there are some specific codecs that are a little more edit friendly. Darren, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, well, H.264 and H.265 are definitely not two of them.
Yeah, they're very. I hate them. I tell everybody, which is funny because a lot of phones and stuff will film. You know, you film video on an iPhone. A lot of times it'll be an H.624, H.625, unless you're using like ProRes. And I'm always telling people, pay attention to the the file type and the format and the codec.
Yeah, you can generally say that the bigger the file size for the same amount of duration, the better quality it's going to be. It's going to be easier to edit with.
Wait, say that again so people hear it. Larger file size is, just as a rule of thumb, if you have two clips and one is a larger file size, it's going to be easier to edit with.
Yes, because it's probably less compression built into it. So
that's one of those things I think people haven't been taught enough, or it hasn't been stated repeatedly enough that it sinks in their heads, because I help a lot of people who are using Resolve. They look at their system, they go, I don't get it. My system technically is exceeding the recommended specs. It should be handling my footage, and I'm having all kinds of lag issues. And I ask them, what codec is the footage you're bringing in? And they look at me like, what? And they don't know that information. And a lot of people, I tell them right off the bat, Resolve makes proxies, and proxies don't always have to be diminished resolution copies of your footage.
that's a very fine point. So proxy doesn't mean worse quality.
No, just means you can transcode, right?
Yeah, it's just different. So you can actually make proxies in full high-res master quality. Proxy just means it's a version of.
So one of the things for anyone out there who's struggling with Resolve, and you go like, I've got a decent computer. And there's a video, I have videos on it. I bet you Darren has some in there too, talking about being able to use proxies. All you need to do is transcode into a better format, even at the exact same resolution, something without all that compression, decompress it and put it into a format, transcode it so that Resolve isn't struggling with that footage. It's not trying to speak English to your piece of footage that's speaking German. It's speaking all the same language. It's getting right through, not all that compression. And you'll notice that the software actually starts working so much smoother. And then all the other things you're doing, color grading and you're doing fusion, all of a sudden all that stuff works better.
But I've got a very high spec machine here for color grading. You know, I'm doing broadcast work. I need to get this stuff running as real time as possible. I struggle with H.265. So H.265, H.264 are they're viewing formats. They're not editing or grading formats in general. Obviously, I have to work with what I have to work with. But H.265, I would always have to, because it's a very clever compression. So it gets the file size down really small, but it's using a lot of maths to get there. And we have to undo the maths to play it.
Yeah, in real time, unmathing, which is funny because a lot of times when we export as creators, people like us on my side of the screen here, Darren, a lot of us who are YouTubers, the YouTube will tell you, hey, our preferred format is H.264. So make sure you upload your videos in H.264. They take other file types too, and other codecs too, but they prefer H.264. So we start to believe that's a good codec. That's what we should be working with, when in fact it can be hurting the performance of your edit. So keep that in mind, people. Really,
it's a delivery format, not an editing format, not a work.
So so your recommendation, H.264, H.265, which is even a higher compression, high efficiency video codec.
It's I don't know if it's the word higher compressions, but it's a more complex math compression. So I actually deliver to YouTube in H.265.
Do you?
Not for, but I'm not suggesting H.264 is
wrong. You are a rebel, sir.
That's what I do, living on the edge as always.
So that's one of the things, just to answer that question that we had from the chat. Yeah, what I would think about doing is you can sort of film in whatever you want to film in, but if you bring it into Resolve, take a look at some of the proxy features and maybe put it into a codec and transcode it into something that Resolve isn't going to wrestle with so much and not have to think so much to try to apply the things that you're doing to it.
I mean, I don't have to deal with that too much because when it comes here, I'm generally dealing with either the camera files or a very high resolution master. So I've got a paper that I deliver. What's email now these days? But it's a step-by-step guide into how I want the editor to prepare the program for me for grading. So it's literally like check this box, do this. Just follow it to the letter, and everyone will be happy.
There's a couple of questions coming in here that I want to make sure that we're talking to the people who are wonderful enough to hang out with us today. And Drew Project said, "Hey, I have a question. I've noticed that sometimes when I apply a conversion LUT to my Sony S-Log3 footage, the Rec 709 space is blown out and clipped, whereas if I do it by hand, it's fine." And he's on Final Cut Pro. Is there a Final Cut? Is there any off the top of your head? I'm not a Final Cut user. Is there any reason you would know that? Yes, you're in the wrong part of the library today, Drew.
Yeah, but it's nice to see you here, Drew.
A lot of people do that. Do they have like these LUTs that they'll use? What's your? I've seen you talk a little bit about LUTs. I kind of sometimes feel like I like LUTs, but they feel like a shortcut that sometimes doesn't do what I want it to do.
They're good if they work well. So, Drew, I don't know if you are using a LUT. I don't know how Final Cut Pro Color Space works. Premiere has done a lot of work with its color space recently, but it causes us a lot of problems sometimes because they have their own interpretation of what it should be. If I do an ARRI LUT versus the ARRI color space in DaVinci Resolve, there is a very slight difference, and it's just how the manufacturer interprets that white paper. But if you're getting really bad blown out stuff, the LUT you're using may be wrong.
Might be junk.
Yeah, because S-Log3 is one of the easiest things to put in the right color space. And if you're doing it by hand and it looks okay, it means it's not clipped at source, which is good. That's
Yeah.
that's what you want. But I would suggest that your color management's not quite right. But I don't know how Final Cut Pro works. I'm sorry.
And Cycle and Sid asked, Paul asked, I've got an S10 camera set to HEVC. Is this better than H.264? I don't know that I would say better. It's a different type of compression, as Darren was saying. What did you call it? A more sophisticated? What did you call it?
I can't remember what it was.
I think it's
just more complex maths.
Yeah.
You know,
and in terms of filming, Paul, I usually say, choose what you want, but if you're going to bring it in to edit with it, definitely transcode that into something that is more edit friendly, because neither one of the two, HEVC is typically H.265, and neither one of them, video editing software, don't like it because they're reading through too much compression.
Yeah. I've just read Drew's comment, actually. He says, I haven't tried the official Sony LUT. Guilty.
Oh, there we go.
So stop buying rubbish LUTs from places that you don't know where you're getting them from.
He was at LUT Mart.
It's not so it's not as common now, but when I first started my YouTube channel, the LUTs that were flying around are a disgrace, some of them, to be honest.
Well, I think sometimes people think it's a quick way to make a buck. Like everyone for a while there, it seemed like everyone, especially in the camera space, everyone had their LUT. They were putting out their LUT, like their custom LUT. Get my look.
There's a lot of science goes behind it. Like,
yeah,
you've really got to. It's not just a case of let's make something look pretty on this shot of a car and sell it. This is not how it works.
The great Mr. Alex Tech is here in the chat. Hey, Alex, good to see you, pal. This is a good thing for you, your hard drive, but it means Resolve has to work harder to uncompress the format. That's why you get slower, worse performance with H.265. Couldn't have said it better ourselves. Good to see you, Mr. Alex Tech.
You're right, Alex.
Dan, I'm going to pop in really quick.
Yes.
It just got a little bit loud.
I got a little bit loud? Really? Is it just me? That's how I am sometimes. I get excited. I'm from New England. I'm good for both. I'm going to start gesticulating next. Let me go back to the other question that I was talking to you about for a minute there, Darren. You do a thing where you create, I don't even know what I want to call it, like a sandwiched space inside of your nodes, where you set up a node tree where you go, hey, here's the footage, and you use these things called color space transforms that you drop into the node, and you do one on one end and you do one on the other, and you create that open, larger color space room that we were talking about earlier. Can you show us an example of that, why you would use it, and in real time how you build it, just to sort of give us an idea?
Yeah, what's good actually is that we've just done what we've just done, because that leads quite nicely into this actually.
Awesome.
So let me show you. So really, let me just go to my screen. Okay, let's reset this one. What I'm going to do, if we go down to, can you see my project settings?
I can see it.
Great, right. So what I'm going to do is take off the automatic color management. Okay, so what this is doing, I'm going to go back to the default, which is DaVinci YRGB, which effectively means I'm going to do the color management myself. And by doing the color management myself, I need to tell, I've now not got that option, sorry. This is where it says use, what's the input color space? That's gone, because I've taken automatic color management off. So I've now just got, this is it, starting from scratch. This is, you've just opened Resolve for the first time. This is what it looks like, okay? So I've got a single node on here, okay? So I can do what we did before. We can just start grading this up, okay? Or I can control the color management myself, as opposed to letting Resolve do that for me. So if we take the first node, do you remember earlier I was saying about you take your 3 different camera sources and you're going to send them all to a common color space?
Yes.
And then so we're going to do that now. So what I'm going to do is go to my effects, and in here, this is in the free version as well. You've got something called color space transform. I'm going to drag and drop that on. And if you're struggling following this, I have got episodes on this that sort of do exactly what I'm doing now. So you can watch that again, sort of at your own pace if you want to. But all you've got to do is take all the defaults, let Resolve handle that. It knows what it's doing with all this stuff. All you've got to do is look at the top, and you've got to say input color space and output color space. All right, so what I'm going to do is my input color space is, as we know, this is ARRI. This could be Sony, it could be Canon, but I know that it's ARRI. You do need to
begin with, just very clear. When you do this, you're setting up this first color space transform in the first node. You have to know what the footage is coming from, what camera, what it was filmed in. It's like you said earlier.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Now, so sometimes we don't know that information. I mean, many times we don't know that information in my world. The directors come in, or whoever's come in, the cameraman's not here. We don't know we don't know what it is. So sometimes I'll just play with some of these and just see if I can get a nice starting point. If you don't know, and it mentions this in my explainer video, but just set it to Rec 709 and just treat it as if it's Rec 709. So if you really don't know and you've tried a few of these out and everything looks ridiculous, just go for Rec 709. You'll be fine. So the input gamma on this one. So we've got gamma and color space, the two work hand in hand. I'm going to explain Rec 709 gamma in a moment, but this is ARRI log C3. So this would be Sony S log 3, for example. And now it's starting to look something a bit more that we're used to. Okay. So my output color space is saying use timeline, and my output gamma is saying use timeline. So if we click in here, what that's looking at is this timeline color space here. Now, what we want to do is send this to DaVinci wide gamut color space, because we want that nice big play area to do all our color work in. So I'm going to change that to be DaVinci wide gamut, which is here. And the output color space is going to be what's called DaVinci intermediate. So it's an intermediate color space. Okay. That is now, oh, sorry, that's absolute rubbish I'm talking there. My output color space in project setting is going to be Rec 709. And it's going to be, this is where it gets confusing. You've got gamma 2.2 and you've got gamma 2.4. To make this not go too heavy on a Sunday, 2.2 is for the web, 2.4 is for TV. So let's do it to 2.2. I would imagine most people are outputting for YouTube, for the internet, for Vimeo, whatever you send it to. Gamma 2.2. Yes, so but gamma 2.2 is basically a computer display. Gamma 2.4 is a TV. Okay, that's about as deep as you need to know. So now our image looks rubbish. Why is that? Because our output color spaces are wrong. So what I'm going to do is send this to DaVinci wide gamut. This is, and if you don't follow this, you basically just need to, you just need to trust me. This is where to go. So this is the input color space is the camera, output color space is DaVinci wide gamut. So
now you've effectively just said, hey, listen, we set the project one way just to sort of keep, which is going to say, hey, do not color grade this. And at the end, it should be going out to Rec 709. That was kind of your project settings. And so very generic, don't touch the color grade. And at the end, it should be Rec 709. Yep. Now you're sitting on a clip and you're saying, I'm going to color grade this. I've told DaVinci Resolve, leave it alone. Let me do it myself. Yep. And you have taken this and said, this is what the footage, just the camera, the footage came from. Yep. And I'm going to take that, use this node to tell it that with the color space transform, tell it where it came from, and then move it into like the output of that node. That's exactly what you're doing, like an input of the node and an output of the node. The output is now in this DaVinci wide gamut.
Absolutely correct.
And DaVinci wide gamut is what we talked about earlier, right? It's DaVinci's native larger color space that allows you to do more with the color grading.
Correct. Yeah, we want to work in a nice large color space so we've got all that dynamic range that the camera shot on. We don't want to lose that until the very end when we're going to funnel it down. So let's put that end.
Right. So now this node brought our clip from whatever it was from the camera. We're in Resolve. It puts it into DaVinci wide gamut color space. But now we need to do something that sort of like we've translated into this giant color space language, but we need to do something at the end to get it back to Rec 709 on the output, right?
Correct. And we need to do that straight away because my monitor that I'm looking at, this looks rubbish. I can't grade this because I can't see what's going on. So
because you've told the project that it should be thinking Rec 709.
I've told the project output is slightly different setting. This is saying when I render the program, make sure
when it's finally rendered. Okay. Yeah. So now it's just deferring to DaVinci wide gamut, and of course your monitor doesn't read DaVinci wide gamut, correct? Is that, okay.
Yeah. You can't go to a shop and say, "Can I have a monitor set to DaVinci wide gamut?" There's no such thing. That color space is bigger than human vision.
Ah, okay, gotcha.
It just doesn't exist. In fact, dare I bring this up?
Oh, here we go.
No, let's finish this first.
I thought you were going to go CIE. That's okay. So right now you've done the first step of translating this into a larger color space. Yep. Now we need to get it back into what's going to be the final export. Even though you haven't color graded yet, you're sort of creating that world to color grade within.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the word sandwich. I think that's a term Colin Kelly uses a lot. Is making a little node sandwich here. So it's camera, camera space, which is large color space, which is huge color space. There's no TV or computer monitor can display that. It's massive. We're then going to send it to a unified color space, which in this case is DaVinci wide gamut. And we then need to bring it down. And we need to do that before we grade. So what I'm going to do is add another node. And we don't want to grade on this node. This is a technical node. Okay, we're just going to leave it there to do its technical job. I'm going to add another node, add serial. Now this, I could go and do that stuff again that we were doing earlier. So I could try and set it. Oops, a little bit extreme. Oh, I don't know why that's breaking so quick. So I could try and do a grade on that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this one here. I'm going to label it grade. Okay, so this is to do my grading. Now I'm going to add another node, add a serial, and this is going to be my end one. So what this is going to do is take us from what I've called big space, which is DaVinci wide gamut. So once we've sent the thing to DaVinci wide gamut, all the work we do here is in large color spaces in DaVinci wide gamut. We then need to view it. So my monitor is displaying Rec 709. So I'm going to take another one of those color space transforms. And this time I'm going to do the opposite. Our input color space is DaVinci wide gamut because that's what's being fed into it. These nodes are it's just feeding. This represents my source, the camera. It's feeding into this. Whatever I do here is then fed into this. This will do my grade, will be fed to this node. And what this node is going to do is take us from DaVinci wide gamut to Rec 709. And the gamma we need will depend whether we're going to the web or to TV. So we're going to go to the web on this one. It's gamma 2.2. And now our image looks great. Okay. Now what we don't do is touch this one. So I'm just going to label that DaVinci wide gamut to 709. Oh, let's call it Rec 709 to be technically correct. Now, as long as I don't touch these two nodes, that color space is now looking good. So this looks correct. This looks like we did the automatic color management before. It's exactly the same, but we're doing it manually. That's all we're doing. So you use one or the other. You use automatic color management or you use what's called CSTs, color space transforms. Now you don't touch these now. They just live there and we do all our grading here. So if we want to do whatever we want to do, just want to cool that image off. We're doing that in DaVinci wide gamut color space. So we've got all the dynamic range, but we're viewing it. We've got this on the end. So it means we're viewing it. Oh, I know why I've got that on. But we're viewing it in Rec 709 because that's what my monitor is. My monitor is Rec 709. I can't view DaVinci wide gamut. There's no such thing. So if I didn't have this node on it, I'd just be seeing this permanently. I can't grade that image. I don't know what it's going to look like until I put the 709 on. Oh, it's going to look like that. You don't want to guess that at the end. You don't do all the grade and then put your 709 color space transform on. Is this making sense? Because if
I want. So just I'm trying. With me, I have to have it make sense in my brain. So the first node and the last node are basically like translators. They're the first one saying, "Hey, listen, we're taking this footage from whatever it was filmed. We're going to tell it. We know it came from this camera, this phone, whatever, and we're going to move it into this large color space. We're going to translate it so that it's in this DaVinci wide gamut. So it's almost like if it was a funnel, it came the thin part and then opened up." And then when we get to the last node, it's doing the opposite. It's taking that giant color space and squeezing it back down to come out as Rec 709, the color space that almost everything that we're used to seeing on, YouTube that's the color space. So you've built these two funnels that are almost like the large end of the funnels are looking at each other and they're doing all the translating. And that middle node, you're working in the center saying, I'm in this giant color space, this color space now, and all these things I can do are going to be a lot more dynamic than if I just stayed in that tiny Rec 709 space. Is that like close?
So like Drew's problem of clipping, well, I'm not going to get that because I'm in this large color space. I can clip if I want to, but I'm in that large color space all the time. But remember, there's no such thing as if I could view a monitor in DaVinci wide gamut, I wouldn't need Rec 709 because we just go.
And it all has to do with what our physical eyes can recognize too, right? Light and color.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this question. If you're in that space and you create this larger color space, I told you to hold my calls.
Sorry. I'm just on a live stream. Can I call you back? Yes. Oh, can you get one off Mum? Sorry, Dan. I've got to go. Bye.
Hold her up. Listen, there's a rule. If you're going to come on the live stream, you got to be on the live stream.
You know what? I've never done a live stream.
You got to have her join us.
My daughter calls.
Oh, that's who it is.
Every time on a live stream.
All right. Well, tell her she's welcome here anytime. So listen, once we have this larger color space, does that mean when we're down playing around with the primaries and the controls, are they going to act a little bit different? Because it's I would think if it's a larger color space, does that physically change do we suddenly, like the idea of headroom, does that mean that we're going to get more incremental motion in the different wheels, gamma, lift, gain, things that we're playing with?
Okay. Getting deeper.
I'm going to go deep. I want to know, like, once they're in this space, what's going to happen?
Some of the tools are what's called color space aware. So they do behave dynamically. So the HDR tools, for example, know what color space I'm in. The color space I'm in is determined by that timeline setting that I set in the project. So those settings are for saying if a tool is color space aware, do your magic in this color space. But the simple tools like the lift, gamma, gain, they're not color space aware. They work absolutely fine, but they're not aware they're in DaVinci wide gamut. They're just our footage is naturally being treated well because it's in that color space.
Okay.
So only some of the tools are color space aware. You don't need to worry too much because you've got your Rec 709 on the end. So you're seeing everything in Rec 709 anyway. You just move the tools. Don't worry that you're in this large color space. Let the tools do that work for you. But yes, some of the tools are more color space aware, and you can even get really heavy and you can actually override what color space they work in. You can mix color spaces. You can really go, you can go CST to DaVinci wide gamut to ARRI to Sony. The math's always correct. It maps up and down. People say, how come if I've got Rec 709 footage and I'm throwing it into this wide color space, doesn't it break the footage? It doesn't. It's all mapped technically correctly. It's all looked after. So this DaVinci wide gamut is like a huge bucket, if you like, of color that's just looking after it. So the color space transforms or automatic color management or LUTs, if they're not Drew's ones, will automatically put everything into the right color space.
He's throwing you under the bus, Drew.
a technical LUT is normally from the camera manufacturer. You can go onto the camera's manufacturer's website and download technical LUTs.
And that's probably where you want to, just like if you're like a guy like me on a PC and you're trying to install the proper drivers, you probably want to go to the manufacturer because you should hopefully have the more accurate LUT to apply.
I've got some actually. Are you seeing me or my Resolve?
I'm seeing you, but I have a quick question here because Dimitri asked, when would you use automatic color management versus color space transform workflow? Is there a specific situation that you go, oh, I always lean this way towards automatic versus color space?
Yeah, it's a preference. You use one or the other, and it is a preference. Okay, I prefer the CST workflow because it's probably habit more than anything. I've used it for a long time like that. The big advantage of the color space transforms over automatic is I can control where in the workflow I'm going to Rec 709 and where I'm not going to Rec 709, which we're getting pretty heavy color grading techniques now. The automatic color management happens. The downside of it for me is it happens before the color page and after the color page. So the input color space going to DaVinci wide gamut and the end going DaVinci wide gamut to Rec 709 happens outside of the color space, outside of the color page. So you're not in control where in the pipeline that happens. It's pretty heavy stuff. I would say if you're beginning, use the automatic color management because it's really good and it's going to look after you and you're going to have no problems at all. If you want to get a bit geekier with it, color space transforms is a nice way to get yourself in there.
Gotcha. All right, that makes total sense to me. Here's a question from Ken Ross, who's talking about the way you had set up the project settings and then jumped into CST workflow. Why did you pick Rec 709 in the project, but not in the node? Like when you were setting up that first node, you were referencing the camera, the footage we think the camera came from. But at the beginning, when you put 709, that was your output, correct? Just in the project setting?
Yeah, let me, probably best if I show you that.
Yeah.
Just to check I understand.
There was at one point earlier when you were talking, you said like when in doubt, you could set the input for Rec 709, but that was for colors. That was for managed color space. When you're going into a CST, if you open up your project settings, how do you have your project settings right now? Like on this, yeah.
So my project settings at the minute are color science DaVinci RGB. That just means I'm going to color manage it myself. Mm-hmm. The timeline color space is set to DaVinci wide gamut. This is what we were just talking about for the color space aware tools, which means any of the tools that can operate in a large color space, I'm telling it to work in DaVinci wide gamut. So that's not the same as here. I'm telling the clip what to do. This is telling the tools how to behave. And this one here, output color space, is saying when I render, I want you to render Rec 79 Gamma 2.2.
Gotcha.
It's basically putting
that's down the road. That's into the deliver page. We're all done.
Yep.
What are we going to be rendering this project?
I can prove that if I change this to be 2.4. Oh, I'm trying to do it so you can see the clip. Nothing happens to the shot.
Gotcha.
Doesn't change at all. It's only when I deliver. It's actually putting a tag on the clip, so it's a little bit geeky.
Now, I want to be very conscious of your time with us here today, and we're getting very close to the end. Do you have time for one more question?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
All right. So there was a question we had that just basically said, could you show us a little bit more of what's going on in between these nodes? Can you give us a few more steps of what you might do once you've set up this CST workspace? You've got one node. Show what do you give us a little more of what you might do if you set this up? I'm guessing in most cases you don't usually just have one node in between and tweak it and call it a day.
Yeah, I've got what's called a fixed node tree, which you might have heard a term bashed around a while. I've got that because I've just did an episode last night, actually, which looks into it a little bit as well. Oh, does it? I can't remember. It was a long time ago last night. I've definitely got episodes where you see what's called my fixed node tree. And what that is a template of a workflow that I would like to adhere to. So the beginning would always be this. The end would always be this. And in the middle, I've got a load of nodes that are labeled with ideas, if you like, but they're empty. So when I start a project, I don't have to keep going add serial, add serial, add serial. I might have one labeled. So the first one here, for example, would be exposure. Then I'd have another node in here. I'm not going to build up too many here, but I'd have another one here. And this might be saturation. Let's argue that. Okay. In fact, let me relabel this one. I'm going to call it exposure and contrast. So these are empty at the minute. If I switch those on and off, that they're not doing anything to the image because I haven't actually put a grade on it. I've just labeled them. So my fixed node tree is like a roadmap, if you like. It keeps me focused on when I've got to grade 500 shots a day sometimes. I want to be nice and focused. So it'll say things like hue, it will say color warper, it will say contrast. It just gives me ideas. So this first one just keeps me disciplined. So this never changes, and then we grade up here. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to do exactly what I did before, but now our image is looking much better because we're nearly at the bottom point with shadows. You don't have to go to the bottom, but I've got a little bit more room down there if I want to. As soon as I go below that, we're losing detail in her jumper and her hair. I can stretch up a little bit. I've got room. I'm just looking at my waveform, and now I can pop these out because you should see the waveform and vector scope now because I'm in a different
absolutely
display setting. Yeah. So I'm keeping an eye on this saturation. So let's go to my saturation here. And I'm just staying on the primary tool. There's tons of different ways of doing saturation, but let's just add a little bit of saturation. And I can see those boxes growing. Sorry, the trace growing. I'm just being careful here. You can just see the red is tipping into that box, which means it basically means just be careful. And if
I had no idea about that before. Those boxes are literally sort of like the safety rails for the scope.
Technically, you're starting to get what's called illegal colors. So my programs can be rejected. They go through a quality control and they can get rejected for broadcast. Oh, wow. So you have to keep an eye on that sort of stuff. You can go outside the box with certain limits, but that's just saying, I look at those boxes as if you're in there, you better know why you're in there. Do you really want that red?
Can I ask a question here? This is one that I found really interesting because I was slowly learning my way through the scopes, and you're on the vector scope, and there's one other line as opposed to looking like basically a target from the scope from a gun.
Yeah.
There's this one other line that define. Can you please you tell people what?
Yeah. So what that is, I've brought that up, but it's not on by default. But if you go to the setting here, okay, and we go down here, you can say show skin tone indicator, and what this line is indicating. Let me see if I can bring up there you go. This should give you a better trace now. What that line is saying is this is a good indicator of where skin tone should sit. And it doesn't matter what color skin you have, that is a general good indicator of where skin should sit. And if we look here, if I bring that display qualifier focus up again, it might be on by default. Just bear with me. There, you can see, can you see the little circle? So that's on her forehead there. So I know her skin tone is set to a very good value there.
So you do that again. You put you have that indicator. So you've got the scope on her skin. You've got the cursor there.
Just an average part of skin.
And if you look at the scope, it's actually right on that line.
Yeah. Now the real rule with this is people hear that you've got to be sat on that line. You don't. What you need to be is consistently on it, under it, or over it. But consistent is the word. If you want your skin tones to match throughout a scene, they can sit under, they can sit over, but they should be consistently there.
Oh, so it's just a great reference point of if you're gonna, because we know that sometimes, I mean, color grading it really creates so much mood and story in itself that, you know, trying to get things to be consistent. So you're using it as a reference point, one of the reference points to help get a more consistent look to different footage.
Absolutely. So, you know, if we want to go extreme here, you can see the scopes all move, and this is green, yellow, red, magenta, blue, and cyan. So as I move, that's probably better with offset actually. If I move everything over to the blue, the vector scope's just moving. I mean, you can actually take your offset here, and if you want your image to be nice and neutral, this tray should sit evenly in the middle. So something like that. I'm looking at the vector scope, not the image. I'm going to let go, and there we go. And that actually looks better. I was just looking at the vector scope, and that looks a bit green to me. That looks more neutral. That's
awesome. So you know, it's the functionality of these scopes and the ability to not lean on them to tell you what something should be, but to use them as reference points and understand what's happening in your footage, and then the changes you make. And you know, I think about it in my brain, because I come from such a musical background. It's like changing the equalization, you know, EQing a piece of, you know, an audio or vocal, and I can look at you know, a waveform and go, oh, my vocal has too much bass. I can see it, you know, clipping out the bass, and then tweaking and just making adjustments till it's, you know, it sounds what I think is right.
I would recommend anyone who's, if you want to just push your color grading skills a little bit, is start to understand the scopes. If I just switch my camera, that is my real scopes that I use. I mean, there's I think I've got 11 different scopes up there. Wow. They're all telling me different things. This is telling me it's false color, so it shows me where skin tone should be sitting. This is telling me whether that skin's on the vector line. This one here is just showing me the bottom 10% of my shadows. I mean, I've just got these tools up permanently. So they're reading the same levels as DaVinci Resolve, so the readings are the same. I've just got about eight different tools in there.
That's crazy.
All analyzing the same stuff. But
well, that's what you do every day, right? I guess you need that many reference points to really have every vantage point for the color grading that you're creating. Drew says, hey, Darren, I apologize in advance for all my future questions on your videos. Now, by the way, Darren, Darren has a couple of beginner videos that we've linked down in the description of this live stream. You can see them down there. I'll post them into the pinned comment afterwards as well. And I've also got a link to his channel that you can go down in the description, find his channel. It is his name, Darren Mostyn. You can go there, you can subscribe, you can start checking out the tutorials he's got there. The stuff is it's heavy. There's some of the stuff is nice and easy and brings you in the front door nice and quietly and shows you around, but you get into the weeds on some of the color grading stuff, and I find it literally is like learning a new language, and it opens a whole new world that I didn't know existed out there. And I gotta thank you not only for doing the stuff you do here on YouTube, but joining us here today and just giving a little taste of it.
I really enjoy making them as well, and it's you know, I get a lot of satisfaction out of it. I get a lot of very nice comments. I mean, you just wake up every morning, people are saying thank you, you've really helped my colors look better, you know, and that's really nice. And I've actually got a very early episode, so I look like a nervous school kid. It's on scopes, so in fact I've got playlists. If you go to my main channel, there's playlists, and they're pretty well curated. Actually, I'm pretty good at, I don't just put beginners ones in that aren't beginners ones. So there is actually a beginners playlist in there. Some of the episodes are old, but they're all kind of relevant. There might be version 17 software, but scopes are scopes, you know.
Right. Listen, I have one final question for you.
Yeah,
I am from New England, and you're from the UK, and I think we need to settle this once and for all. Is it color or is it color?
Right. Well, this is a nightmare for me, because my biggest audience is USA. So for SEO, I have to spell it your way.
You have to butcher the English language just to satisfy the heathens across the pond.
My excuse for it is that's how Black Magic Design spell it. So that's my excuse. But it does pay me. The SEO's a nightmare for colorists because the letter U in there.
Yeah.
And secondly, you're normally about page 40 on Google, preceded by hairdressers.
Oh, jeez.
If I go to a party and tell people I'm a colorist, everyone gets really excited. They think I'm
do they? They look right up to your hair first? Yeah. You go, no, not that kind of colorist.
And then you tell them what you really do. They're like, oh, right, that's not very interesting.
Much less excited. Well, listen, Darren, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for your time and your knowledge. Maybe sometime in the future, when you have another moment and we get up to speed, we could have you back and we could maybe go a little deeper.
I'm happy doing these things, honestly. And I'm enjoying your channel as well. I've been having a good route through it. So
I appreciate that.
It's nice to meet you finally as well.
All right. You as well. And everyone who has been hanging out here today in the chat, thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you for the great questions. If you have any other questions along the way, absolutely jump over to Darren's his channel. Make sure you're subscribed. And he's a guy who's, he's in there. He's got a lot of great tutorials. Don't be afraid to jump in there and ask some questions along the way and search through his catalog because he does have a lot of content there. I can tell you firsthand because I've been in there diving through it and finding things and learning more about the deeper aspects of really how to color grade and understanding color as DaVinci Resolve sees it and how to use that color page. So thank you so much.
And what you're seeing on my channel is obviously my take on it, but I do feed my children as being a colorist. That is how I earn my money. So I do know what I'm talking about. There's some very good channels out there, but there's some I've seen some interesting angles.
And that's all we have to say on that.
Let me put it that way. But I do live streams every now and again as well. So if you notify, I normally do a little bit of, I'll do some training or something in there. I'll do some little demos and things. But I'll happily come back on here and we can carry on the conversation.
Fantastic. I appreciate that. So listen, everybody, have a great rest of your weekend. Anyone else who's in the United States or enjoying football, Super Bowl Sunday, folks. So I hope you guys, Darren's like, what game is that? So I hope everyone enjoys their Sunday. If you're a football fan, watch the Super Bowl and root for whichever team is not the New England Patriots. And we'll see you guys all soon. Peace.
Take care. Thanks.